Today, filmmakers rely heavily on CGI to build entire worlds. But back in 1995, in 12 Monkeys, director Terry Gilliam didn't want a clean, high-tech future. Instead, he imagined a world that felt broken, dirty, and uncomfortable, almost like a nightmare that feels too real. And to achieve that, he relied on practical effects, relocations, creative camera work, and psychological design. Let's break down how some of the most iconic scenes in this film were actually created. One of the most iconic and unsettling moments in 12 Monkeys is the interrogation scene, where James Cole is presented before a group of scientists for the very first time. On screen, it feels surreal, chaotic, and almost psychologically disturbing. But what makes it truly fascinating is that this entire sequence is not driven by CGI at all. Instead, it stands as a masterclass in pure practical filmmaking. Director Terry Gilliam deliberately avoided using green screens because he wanted to create a low-tech future, a world that feels broken, industrial, and uncomfortable, rather than sleek and advanced. To achieve this, the production team used real abandoned locations, including old power stations in Pennsylvania and Baltimore. These places were already filled with dusty pipes, corroded metal, and industrial waste, which naturally gave the set its grimy, dystopian atmosphere, without needing artificial enhancement. At the center of the scene is the bizarre chair that Cole is strapped into, known in production as the chrysalis. This wasn't just a prop, it was a fully functional hydraulic lift system that physically raised Bruce Willis high into the air. Gilliam's intention was simple but effective: make the actor feel genuinely uncomfortable and powerless. Because of this, the fear and confusion you see on his face aren't just acting, they're real reactions to a physically disorienting setup. Another standout element is the rotating cluster of screens, often referred to as the video ball. Instead of being added later in post-production, this was a real, mechanically built spherical rig covered with old CRT monitors. These screens displayed live video feeds of the scientists, allowing Willis to interact with them in real time. This not only made his performance more natural, but also added a layer of realism that CGI often struggles to replicate. To enhance the unsettling tone, cinematographer Roger Pratt used Dutch angles and wide-angle lenses, slightly warping the environment. The walls, machines, and space itself appear disoriented, giving the audience a sense that reality is off balance, just like Cole's mental state. The result is a scene that doesn't just look strange, it feels wrong. And that's exactly why, even decades later, it remains more haunting and believable than many modern CGI-heavy sequences. Another visually striking moment in the film comes when James Cole is sent back in time again, strapped onto a strange, chaotic machine and pushed into a massive mechanical structure. At first glance, it may look like a typical sci-fi time travel setup, but in reality, its design is intentionally unsettling and far from perfect. Director Terry Gilliam made a bold creative choice here. Instead of showing a clean, futuristic, high-tech machine, he wants something that looked unstable, risky, and almost disturbing. The goal was to make time travel feel less like an advanced achievement and more like a dangerous experiment. One of the most noticeable elements is the plastic wrapping around Cole. This wasn't just for visual style, it was meant to create a sense of containment and contamination control, reflecting a world devastated by a deadly virus. In this future, Cole isn't treated like a human being. He's treated like a test subject. He's strapped down, restrained, and handled, almost like an object, before being pushed into the machine, which adds a layer of discomfort and dehumanization to the scene. From a behind-the-scenes perspective, the entire setup was built using practical sets and real-world locations rather than relying on CGI. Due to budget limitations, the filmmakers used abandoned industrial buildings filled with pipes, heavy machinery, and metallic structures. The production team then enhanced these spaces by adding scrap materials, mechanical parts, and industrial junk, creating a unique retro-futuristic aesthetic. As the movie reaches its climax, the airport sequence, as what initially feels like a straightforward chase and shooting scene, but behind the scenes, it's a carefully constructed and technically demanding piece of filmmaking. What's surprising is that the airport you see on screen isn't a real functioning airport at all. Instead, director Terry Gilliam and his team transformed a massive indoor venue, similar to the Pennsylvania Convention Center, into a fully believable airport environment. Every detail, from signboards and glass partitions to security lanes and passenger flow, was artificially designed and staged. This gave the filmmakers complete control over lighting, camera placement, and actor movement, something that would have been nearly impossible in a real airport setting. From a cinematography perspective, the scene was practically challenging. Cinematographer Roger Pratt had to maintain consistent lighting across a huge open space where light could easily become uneven. To solve this, he carefully balanced natural light with large-scale artificial lighting setups, ensuring that the entire concourse remained evenly lit and visually cohesive across all shots. The sequence itself is constructed using a mix of wide shots and tight close-ups, allowing the audience to feel both the scale of the crowded environment and the emotional urgency of the moment. During Cole's second time travel sequence in the movie, we get a brief but powerful glimpse of World War I, a moment that feels chaotic, disorienting, and strangely unreal. Even though the scene is short, its impact is surprisingly strong, and that comes directly from the creative vision of director Terry Gilliam. Instead of recreating a massive battlefield with hundreds of soldiers, explosions, and large-scale war setups, Gilliam intentionally chose a minimalist and psychological approach. Budget was one reason, but more importantly, he didn't want to show war as a clear, structured reality. He wanted it to feel like a fragmented memory. A muddy environment, a few scattered soldiers, and a background filled with thick smoke. But the real trick lies in how it's filmed. Cinematographer Roger Pratt used wide-angle lenses and slightly disoriented framing, which makes the environment feel warped and surreal. The camera doesn't feel stable or grounded, just like Cole himself, who isn't even sure whether he's in the past or trapped inside a hallucination. Lighting was kept uneven and unpredictable, while heavy smoke effects were used to hide the limitations of the set. This cleverly creates the illusion of a much larger battlefield, even though the actual setup was relatively small. In the end, the scene isn't about showing war realistically. It's about how war is experienced in a broken mind. And that's why, despite its simplicity, it feels so intense and unsettling. Another visually striking and symbolic moment in the film is when animals are seen wandering freely across empty city streets. At first glance, it feels chaotic and almost surreal, but the way this scene was created is actually a perfect example of smart, controlled filmmaking. In reality, the filmmakers didn't release animals randomly into a city. Instead, trained animals were used under strict supervision, ensuring complete safety during filming. Each animal was shot separately in controlled conditions, often with trainers nearby to guide their movement. The real magic happens in editing and camera placement. Different animal shots were filmed individually and later combined in post-production, in such a seamless way that it appears as if multiple animals are roaming the streets at the same time. To enhance realism, real locations were used, but they were filmed during early morning hours or controlled time windows, when the roads could be kept empty and manageable. So that's it for today's behind-the-scenes breakdown. Let me know in the comments which scene surprised you the most.